Hello, everyone. Welcome to FiredUp, the podcast for marketers working in early and late-stage startups. I'm Morgan McClintock, the CEO of startup marketing agency Firebrand. We've launched this podcast to interview the best in the business, but I'm not going to do it alone, so please meet my co-hosts.
I'm Nicole Pytel, Firebrand's VP of Content Marketing.
And I'm Chris Ulbrich, Firebrand's Head of Media Relations.
I'm Ian Lipner, a tech PR and crisis communications veteran.
We'll drop a new episode each week, so there's plenty of fuel for your marketing fire. Get the spark you need to take your startup to a whole new level. Hello and welcome to Fired Up, the startup marketing podcast. My name's Morgan McClintock and I'm joined today by my co-host, Chris Ulbrich. Hi, Chris. How are you?
Doing great. Today we're talking about the pressures and possibilities of marketing in a late-stage private company. It's a real high-wire act. It takes a skilled marketer to conceive and manage campaigns that project the energy and ambition of a startup and the maturity of an established brand.
Lucky for you, we're joined today by Thomas Bean, who is the CMO at Domino Data Lab and has been formerly the CMO at Druva and DataStax. He's a seasoned marketing executive with global experience building and managing marketing teams that establish brand awareness and leadership and contribute to revenue. He's held technical roles and sales roles, and that sort of really taught him the importance of alignment between those functions. He really focuses on the transformative power of technology as well as the customer experience. I want to talk to him about that. He's a US resident, but with a French passport. So he really brings that sort of global perspective. So Thomas, welcome to Fired Up.
Thanks, Morgan. Thanks, Chris. Excited to be here.
So I want to start with something topical in the way that we normally do. There are some recent sort of data out about how the sort of tenure of CMOs is falling year on year. This comes from Spencer Stewart. Tenure of the top 100 advertisers has gone down to 39 months. I think probably in B2B tech, it's less than that. And yet the sort of pressures are higher. The expectations are higher. The budgets are coming down. So just talk to us a little bit about like what it's like to be a CMO in today's environment.
The data is super interesting because it spans across last year, but you think about the changes that we all faced in industry last year. They've been massive at several levels. Like the market completely changed with the advent of Gen AI. We're still in many ways in a crisis where a lot of companies had to downsize and change the way they go to market. So every dimension you can think of, there have been changes. I was actually surprised that the tenure had not reduced more than it was only, I think, a month less than the year before. But it's true that the pressure has increased. Not looking for excuses, by the way, but I think CMOs had to navigate conditions that had not happened in a long time, where really you have these challenges on how you go to market and with fewer people, fewer budgets. So have really focused on the efficiency, which is a big difference when what we were doing even like months ago. And at the same time, so many new opportunities on how to do content, where the whole advent of AI in marketing is almost endless into its ability. So navigating at the same time, taking very tough decisions sometimes on the people side, as well as seeing these opportunities. It's been kind of puzzling. But if you take one step back, I think companies have evolved a lot. And that's why also you've seen more changes than usual in marketing leadership. Some companies who may have tried to do enterprise and PLG and many things at the same time, but all of a sudden you couldn't afford to do these. So that's why there's been a whole reset. Like, do we have the right team? Do we have the right skills? What's the strategy going to be? Some people also said, okay, this kind of navigation in the storm is not necessarily for me. So the pressure has gone up for sure. Some of the decision discussions were pretty tough, but at the same time, the context has been evolving. So that's why you've seen changes, but also lots of new opportunities on the horizon, if not right now. So I think when we look back at these numbers in a year from now, we'll see probably the decline keep on going on, but it's not going to be a drastic one. I think we're all living it's not a reset, but we're kind of entering a new era. So that's the exciting aspect. And And I think the mindset is that, hey, I want to be at the forefront. I want to be writing the story, not being a passenger. I'm an optimistic, so that's the way I look at it.
I agree with that. And so you've run marketing teams at a public company, Tibco, several late-stage companies, Druva, DataStax, now Domino Data Lab, as I said. These are marketing teams of 50 people plus. I want to talk about structuring that team, like alignment and getting real performance out of that organization, given that we have to do more with less. So just a basic question, like what does your marketing team look like in terms of structure?
Yeah, and before I get into it, I think that it's important to put in context what I'm going to describe. It's all based on function, and the outcomes, it has nothing to do with hierarchy. We're going to talk about functions like SDRs and product marketing, who may be in product, who may be in marketing, but the reporting lines is almost like they don't really matter if you take away the personal aspect. It's just the fact that you need the right elements to it to work. I tend to see marketing as really the connection between the company, the products, and its audience, and especially its customers. So at first, product marketing is absolutely fundamental to the setup, defining the message, helping with the content, setting directions also for campaigns is very important. Interestingly, you need to have a various set of skills, technical for a product like ours, but also a deep understanding of our customer audience, what are their pains, etc., all of the traditional elements. But I always start with product marketing because not only do they work very closely with other stakeholders like the product team and sales, but they also give a lot of directions that the rest of marketing is going to use. And it's an interesting team in terms of how do you even set OKRs, because there are a lot of activity related. You need the basics, you need message, you need your launches to work. But I like to mix it also with an impact. How are these launches working and making an impact, even on demand generation or awareness, of course? So the product marketing is top of mind. I also come from product marketing, so that's why. The second big block or pillar, if you want, is really demand generation, which is to me all about the experience. Like right now at Domino, it includes field marketing, it includes web, it includes channels like digital, and it includes campaign, because I'm trying as much as possible not to take an inside out perspective, but an outside in. What is the experience that we're providing to our audience from the people who have no clue about Domino, and we need to educate them and take them to a journey, to even our customers who kind of know us, but may not know us completely. So what are the experiences we're going to build, who are going to have the right touch points at the right level, what they're ready to consume, and how do we earn the right to get to the next level? So it's a combination of a lot of skills. And that's why you need to have these skills plus good program management to really make sure that you really have a team that keeps on not only executing, but keeps on learning, because we need to evolve as quickly as our audience. And the OKRs for them are usually fairly standard, a bit of awareness, but a lot of pipeline. Pipeline is really the North Star. It's the contribution to the rest of the company. Then you have other teams. Partner marketing, as an example, is super important to Domino. Our platform, without getting into technical details, we're really bringing all the goodness of the open source and AI ecosystems into the enterprise. So we work with tons of partners, from the cloud platforms we run into open source technologies like Ray or cool technologies like LangChain. We bring them together. So it's very important for us to work closely with them and bring this to our audience. But at the same time, there's a benefit of getting more awareness and getting more engagement. Some of these partners have reached. So that's why partner marketing, it's a separate team, but that works very closely into everything we do, from the launches to even demand generation. We have a principle in which everything we do needs to be partner ready. Either partners can leverage some of these activities, or we actually make sure that we include them. Every press release, the same way we're thinking, who could be the customer who can validate this point of view or this perspective or this activity? We do the same with partners. So partner marketing, different set of stakeholders, but really working along the way. Coming back to partners, OKRs, awareness and pipeline, but mostly pipeline. Content team, content is art and science at the same time. So working very closely both with product marketing in terms of what to write about and which format, and then working with demand generation to make this. We have an expression that I stole from an ex-coworker: make the assets sweat. So making sure when we have good content, we can have various formats and such. So there's an element coming back to this idea of art and science. That's also something that's important. And the OKRs are a contribution to the business. Once again, pipeline, but also how are we learning? How are we progressing? We have a communications team, social, press, thought leadership, which is very often, and it's interesting in terms of setting OKRs and metrics. But I think the industry is getting better beyond share of voice and whatnot at really looking at the quality of the engagement. So we built a score for this. So we don't look at the volume of mentions as an example, but also the tone of these engagements. Are they in the right publications, so that we can align this with our strategy and the usual social metrics, etc. And then finally, we have an evangelist, a former analyst who works with us, whose role is to really have a market perspective, not pitch products and such, but really have a perspective that we use internally. He's involved in a lot of things we do, but also that we can, he talks at a lot of events and conferences about what is happening on the market. So that's the setup that we have, which is kind of the blueprint that I've used in most of the teams that I've had the opportunity and the honor to lead.
Could you talk a little bit more about that evangelist role? My impression is that while in a lot of tech companies that role has existed for decades, it has achieved new prominence in recent years because of the need to project competence and knowledge, and say, especially when it comes to media relations, as the number of publications that cover technology decreases, the importance of the trusted evangelist increases alongside of that.
Yeah, I think the evolution of both, I agree. I would call it how the media have evolved with less actually of them, and I would even say a little bit less depth. At the same time, the evolution of vendors who, it's been an issue as old as vendors themselves. Like they have a tendency to just talk about, I've done this, I've done that. I think also the audience is getting way more mature and knows what they want. The audience is going to go first to their peers, and they're looking for this understanding. I think we all need to look at a lot of these engagements are first education driven. Our audience needs to educate themselves about their opportunities and challenges. And I think that's where these roles are really important in terms of putting things in context, walking into their shoes, so to speak. And very often it's a very engaging type of content, but these perspectives are attract a lot of attention. And I think it's the right substance to start this education journey. So that's why it is the best practice. It's almost going back to this outside in perspective, making sure that you offer a perspective that the audience can relate to, where they learn something. And it is a good way for the audience to earn you the right to actually get to the next step, which is then talking about yourself maybe. So, and it's something we see useful not only in awareness actually activities, even in terms of demand generation. I'm not saying that podcasts and such are demand generation tactics, but this content very often is the way brands are going to be discovered because they have the depth, they have an openness, and this is something that the audience is going to be comfortable with. So that to me is why you've seen this prominence of evangelist. By the way, the term, probably we all need a better term for this, but it's thought leadership in reality. But I think it's thought leadership with a purpose and with a perspective that is closer to the audiences than actually the vendor.
That's interesting. It reminds me a bit of what we're hearing more about the role of on the revenue team side, the role of the sales engineer emerging and becoming more important, in that expertise becoming more valuable to the customer than might have been in the past. And the customer is looking for someone they can engage with at a deep level right from the get-go because they've done their research perhaps online already, and they are further down the funnel than they might have been previously for the marketing team. When it comes to, media or other kinds of, or community outreach, the evangelist seems to play a similar role.
That's a very interesting perspective. As a former SE myself, I totally subscribe. Actually, I may disagree with you. I think it's always been extremely important. Maybe there's more light on it, but I think, especially when it comes to enterprise or even actually in a context of PLG, companies using PLG a lot, the ability of starting the partnership early before you're even a customer is absolutely critical. And I have a lot of respect. I've been a salesperson as well, so they are very good at building this relationship. But very often the sales engineer is going to create that partnership, really align. Okay, here's what you need to achieve. Here's how we can help. And very often the best actually pre-sales and sales engineers I've seen go way beyond the technology. Yes, you do your demo and you do your POCs and such. You rightly point out that some of these things can happen now without involvement of the vendor. But how are we going to work together? What's going to be the experience? What are the best practices that you can provide? This is what makes the difference. I've always felt in my career, and I've heard a customer tell me once that when you pitch a product, by definition, and maybe because it was in France, but the customer told me, okay, when you pitch a product, by definition, I put you at the same level. I assumed you were as good as the others. But the way you made a difference is that you had references that I really resonated with. So they need to be put in context. And you were able to explain to me how we would work together to get to my objective, even with a timeline. And I think in a world where everybody's bombarded with like GenAI and such, having the ability to project yourself and get to your outcome with a partner, not just a vendor, is critical. I'm stating the obvious, but I think that's where the role of sales engineering is absolutely critical. Very often you'll see sales engineering actually pass the ball to customer success and professional services because they have this context. They build this context and they have maybe the best understand of the thesis that the sales cycle was based on. So, and interestingly, if I go back on the marketing side, yes, using sales engineers in weekly demos, in some of these workshops is extremely valuable because they also have a unique perspective of working with tons of different companies that may become customers or not. So it's another pool of experience or a deep pool of experience that we can tap into.
Yeah. I mean, on that note, as we're talking about the evolution of these different roles within the marketing team, the revenue team, how do you see the marketing team evolving in terms of the size and importance of the different functions you were describing at the outset? When you're a smaller organization, do you put the same emphasis on, say, product marketing that you do when you're larger? Or how do you strike the balance at each phase?
I think there's an element that I want to highlight based even on what I said, which is also it is absolutely a journey, and even the way the team is going to learn is going to help you make these decisions, because every company, should have its unique audience and unique opportunity, and that's what's going to drive the way you're going to shape your team based on your product, on the opportunity. So, do you have a vertical approach? I'm just taking product marketing as an example. Are you going to have a deep vertical approach? Are you having a very consultative way to engage and sell? That's going to shape how many product marketers, as an example. Do you have a very technical product where you set the message and it's more about going in depth and you go there? Or it's actually about having a product that you need to put in the context of the verticals for really your audience to understand the opportunities. I think obviously this understanding is critical to strategy beyond marketing, but I think also what every marketing team needs to do is really learn how to learn. How do you identify quickly what works? How do you scale this approach? How do you experiment and try other things? It feels like I'm stating the obvious, but actually when you double click, it's a process. It takes a lot of data, but it's mostly a mindset. And that's what you need to build. And that's what is going to tell you how to kind of shape your team. So I don't believe there's an abacus where we can say, okay, you're at this stage, you've raised that much money. Here's what your team should look like. It's more about who are you trying to engage with? What are you selling? What's going to be the approach? What's going to be your collaboration with the rest of the company? What is your sales cycle? How is your sales team behaving? That's what's going to drive. But having said that, there are patterns. very often I see product marketing being, everybody I think feels it's very important, but very often I see small product marketing team, which ends up, it's pretty tough being a product marketer when you have all these requests. The whole company comes at you. Hey, I need a new deck, but what about this lounge? And I need somebody to talk. It's really hard. So you need to make sure that you scale your team, really based on the demand that's going to be created in terms of demand, in terms of workload for the product marketing team. And that means you will have to make some choices. What's interesting, I think, in early but also late stage startups, you have so many opportunities that everything looks good, but you never have enough people or time or money to execute. So you'll have to be very diligent on prioritizing. That's key. But based on this, if you have your priorities well set, you should be able to derive how big your product marketing should be. How are you going to set up your demand generation team in terms of your primary channels, in terms of how you're going to build your campaigns? This is yet another domain. You can have, I've seen sometimes organizations with hundreds of campaigns because every single activity becomes a campaign. But what I've seen work more is like stick to your themes that you choose for 6 months to 12 months and have a way to operate this. That gives you an idea of how you need to shape it. And based on what you've learned works or not, okay, and you're probably going to have a discussion with your CEO, your board, your CFO on how you need to scale the team further. These are the two main ones, I think, where you need to have a good end-to-end plan so that you can really scale it at the right level. So all of this to say, I don't want to give an overall answer like you need 5 product marketers and then you need 7 demand generation. I think you need to design your team in a modular way. You make your initial choices. We're going to go after these 2 verticals and we're going to go deep. And I need maybe 1 product marketer and I need 2 demand generation people to drive it. And then as you find more opportunities, as you get better, then you scale. It also is kind of the business plan you're going to drive by the rest of the company. So that's how you can scale.
It sounds like you have a fairly broad perspective on what marketing is. You said right at the beginning, it's really that sort of connection between the company and the customer. So, and quite independent of the org chart. Where do you feel like marketing begins and ends? You talked about customer success. Should marketing own customer success sometimes? Or like, where does marketing begin and where does it end for you?
Very often marketing is going to be the first touch points our audience is going to have. So it begins, you're always marketing, so to speak, even when you have users in your product, and it doesn't end. It doesn't end. As long as you have users, etc., you have the opportunity to improve this experience and add value, which is going to lead to your audience discovering new parts of the product. And so I think we were all formatted in a very vertical way of looking at even go to market. Okay, here's product and marketing sits in the middle before we get to sales. And then we go to professional services and customer success. I think especially with solutions like cloud, SaaS, but even I'm thinking about how some open source technologies are being adopted, the model needs to be turned by 90 degrees. It's different layers that are going to be more prominent or not, depending on where they are in the experience. Sometimes you have an audience that hates being marketed to. So you still do a bit of marketing, but it's in your docs. It's in the content you're going to put out there. It's everywhere. And this is how I think you serve your customers and your audience best. Working closely with sales, you're always selling as well. That's the philosophy there. So I think it's marketing like other functions. Start the moment somebody is interested and comes to your website, say, okay, Domino. And then it doesn't end. You're part of that journey. And with this mindset, I think should marketing own customer success? I don't know that it matters. I want to come back to my point. I think you need strong marketing. You need strong customer success. You need a good connective tissue between them because that's how you serve the customers. That's how you deliver a kick-ass experience. But that's what matters. What they report to doesn't really matter. I may have a lot of CMOs hating hearing this, but that's going back to the point about SDRs. Even I had a CEO I worked for who told me, what matters is to switch them from SDRs from marketing to sales every once in a while. I'm not sure I agree with. What matters is how these teams work together and that the that you have the right understanding of the customer and that you do the right thing on the product and the service side to really deliver value. I think that's what matters. So can customer success be part of marketing? Absolutely. In reality, they are. What the reporting lines should be, I don't know, to be honest.
Yeah, so it sounds like your responsibility is end-to-end, whether it's on the org chart or not, but your philosophy has always been around the customer and putting the customer experience or the customer first, and then, expanding from that. So how do you sort of inculcate that sort of culture of customer centricity into the organization with sales? I mean, obviously with customer success, with product, like what does it mean to you and how do you make that a reality?
The interesting aspect is that I always choose to work in organizations that have this DNA.
So that helps.
But I guess that I'm not finding an easy way out to your question. I think it's very interesting to see how you can contribute to create this culture. I think it's making sure that the customers remain top of mind. Even when we do planning, when we look at certain activities, don't start with what we think or what we would like to happen. Like, what are we going to propose and put in front of customers? So that's an element that is critical. The other one is that if you do this right, you have such a gift with the voice of the customer that it's this is the best marketing I think you can ever have. Nobody's going to talk about your product with the right language about and achieve the same outcomes as your customers if you do your job right. So I think that's where you need to create this virtuous circle where you provided value and you need to actually capture this voice of the customer. They're satisfied. The audience will want to listen to them. And I think that's a domain where everybody thinks maybe as I'm saying this, okay, well, customer success story, a 3-minute video and such. There are many more ways to actually leverage the voice of the customer. Reviews is a big trend that's been around for some time. They matter a lot. And I love it. It's straight from customers to the audience. It's unfiltered when you choose the right platforms. And it's a great way to validate that you have reviews, you have success stories, have programs where you actually take your customers to propose them speaking opportunities, not only at your events, there are industry events. When you know the stories that your customers can tell, what they've achieved, I think elevating them, helping them get the spotlight of the industry on them. Even if your name is not mentioned, it's not only good karma. It is something that's going to be very beneficial. I think it's also something in your domain in communications is absolutely critical. Who wants to hear yet another vendor saying, okay, let me talk to business press? No, take your customers and take that story. That's what actually the press wants to hear about. And you may get coverage. So I think it's important for to build a program around it so that it's not something that it's not an afterthought, but every part of the organization that I mentioned, that I described earlier, product marketing has to talk to customers all the time. Demand gen has to use these stories, look for opportunities to actually elevate. So it's build marketing. Evangelism, what would it be without actually these interactions or actually these discussions with customers? So if you use it well, then you get to this next phase. You will have more customers contributing. And it's something that can have a huge impact, because then when you're really seeing the world the way your customers see it, then your campaigns come very easily. What are the themes? Just go and ask them. What's top of mind for you? What's a challenge? What's a tailwind? You're sure that you're able to talk in the right way about the right topics, which is the foundation of good awareness and good demand generation.
You mentioned PR, and obviously that's a topic near and dear to me. I'm curious, as your organization grows, how do you know that it's time to hire someone to manage comms full time? Because often in an early stage company, that's a role that's delegated to whoever's heading up marketing or one of their deputies. But at some point, it comes time to hire a full-time PR person. I'm wondering how you know when.
I think you need to listen to certain signals and look at what you're doing and what you could be doing. And there will come a time, which I think varies on with every company, where you really feel you're not doing justice because you're constrained by time, or you're constrained by the time your CEO in very early stage can spend and such. And this is where you'll have a signal that tells you, you know what, it's time to do something, to work differently. We need somebody to work very closely with the agency or agencies we use. This is a fundamental way to, this is almost a wedding that in which both parties contribute. But if you want to have the level of creativity, it takes time. The context sharing and all of this. And then also if you want to get to the right opportunities, if you want to get your customers actually to be involved, it's not always easy. I made it sound in a previous question like, oh, you have to do this. It's hard. Communications team, and I respect this, they have constraints and such at our customers. So I think it's an investment. Once you have the right stories, when you start to get the right traction and you want to go beyond just the standard press release that may be actually aggregated and amplified, when you're getting to the point where you're thinking in terms of stories, that's probably where you need a partner like an agency, because you need to have this outside-in perspective being reinforced, and you probably need someone who's gonna really start investing time and creating a strategy and execute as well. That's to me that's the threshold is really, okay, what are the stories we can get to? At the beginning, it's, let's talk about the product and let's do this. What are the stories? And when you get to the plural story, like, which is the company story, to the stories, you know what? We can do more. This is the moment. And it's earlier than what most people think. And it's an investment, if you do it right, that is going to be very rewarding, not only in terms of awareness. I think the fact that your name is out there, that people have read about you, you're going to see the impact also on demand generation and also establishing your brand.
Do you feel the change, when you're sitting at the top of the organization, do you feel the change when your PR moves from, say, early stage to later stage? Is there a moment when you realize you're being seen differently by the press?
I think you do. I'm not sure you're going to see it internally because you're going to have the high fives. Whoa, we got in that publication. Woo-hoo. I think when your customers or your partners tell you, hey, I see more of you. Hey, I read that story. These are the signs. This is what we work for. These touch points, we make an impression, not in the very industrial sense of the world, but on the emotional human side. You made an impression and they remember this of you. Like, okay, we're getting somewhere.
So I want to talk a bit about trends. And so let's just tackle AI right up front. And I mean AI in marketing. How are you using it in your organization? Where is it really having an impact? Where is it not quite there yet?
This is a great topic. AI in marketing is not new. You can say that actually marketing created certain parts of AI, because AI in some of the marketing technology solutions have been here for some time. And so that has been working fine. How do we understand our data better? Even though with the advent of generative AI, we took a step further. I can literally now drop a spreadsheet and get the insights in terms of words super quickly. That's game changing. We're doing a bit of this, but I think it's on the content side that we've seen game changing differences between now and a year from now. And I think it's a great thing, first of all. The gain of time that you have is amazing. We all know it's challenging in our lives to spare enough time to really be creative and such. The ability to train tools like ChatGPT, which is what we're doing. We have all the series of prompts to make sure that we're going to get an outcome from ChatGPT that's going to be compliant with our brand and tone and such. But interestingly, it's at the beginning of the process that we see the most impact. And that's actually something I see beyond marketing. The ability to get a solid outline, if not a draft. You may rewrite 80% of it, but actually it's really good to get you started. It's almost like a launch pad. Of course, you can't just stick to it because you're going to be just doing the same thing as everybody else. But I do think that it's really a great way to use AI. And we're just discovering there are a lot of the automations, a lot of the reporting or some of the documentation that's going to be completely revolutionized by the advent of AI. And I'm not talking about a specific solution. We're just talking about use ChatGPT. So there are ways you need to understand how the beast works, so to speak. You need to tame it. That's why in the team, we have a few people who set time aside to really say, okay, here are the prompts we need to have and such. So we have a predictable outcome from some of these steps that we take, but nothing that we do is just straight out of ChatGPT, nothing that you read and such. But it's a great way to be very creative with illustrations, have content getting started. And in terms of gain of time, it's incredible. And that's why I think it's so exciting about AI in marketing, because a lot of the mechanical stuff will be addressed by the machine. And in a way, I think AI amplifies us as marketers because we can focus on the human aspect. ChatGPT will not tell you what moves your audience. It's just going to repeat what looked good. So it's a good starting point. But then it's on you to actually find that angle, like polish or just sometimes rewrite the whole thing, but just to take it to the level where you need to make that impact.
I totally agree. Great at solving that sort of blank page problem. Where do I start? And then you can evolve from there. And I like the idea of having the library of prompts that people can just tap into. That's certainly one of the things that we're doing to help people to promulgate it across the organization, because you're naturally going to have some people who lean in and who learn about it and who have that mentality. But to really operationalize it, you need those sort of systems and that maybe that library so that and expose people to it. But the blank page problem, just accelerating so you can spend more time on creativity has been huge and is I agree, very exciting. What other trends are you keeping your eye on right now in marketing?
AI is driving a lot of these. I think we're only scratching the surface in terms of how we'll be able to personalize some of the experience in a guided way. I want to be clear. I think really AI is here to amplify the human. And I think it's very interesting. And this is why as marketer, it pushes us towards really the human to human relationship, which is great. AI is not going to replace marketers, but marketers need to adapt to focus on on that aspect. The underlying change at the society level is how do we deal with knowledge and consumption of information? So that's why I think AI, I'm coming back to the AI trend, but it's really a deep one. So in terms of how are the experiences we're going to provide look after these technologies keep on evolving? Do we have the opportunity to personalize, have an even better understanding of our audience and really create that unique path that makes them resonate? I think a very exciting domain. And then on the marketing side, I think what I'm always looking at in terms of trends is what are the latest trends in terms of experiences. We worked differently for a few years. Now we're getting back. I'm in the office here. It's the same as happening to events. So what is the best mix that we can find? To a lot of events organizers are kind of scratching their head. We know that COVID is still around. And so do we still bring 100,000 people to one place, which feels great, but sometimes has consequences. But what's the right mix? How do we look at having the best continuity in the experience for the audience that we have? And I think that's also where it's not a trend per se, but I think that's where we're going to see a lot of evolution in a coming month and years. We're only at the beginning of this whole rewriting of marketing and many other things.
So you've been running marketing departments for late stage startups like DataStax, like Domino, and I'm interested in your advice for earlier stage marketing leaders. What are the programs that they should be putting in place at that earlier stage so that they're ready for later? Namely, what are the trees that they should plant now so they can enjoy the shade of them at a later stage?
To make an awkward use of your analogy of the trees, I think don't plant trees because they're gonna last 2,000 years. I think learn how to plant trees and learn what makes them grow. Because I want to go back to a year ago. We get to build a whole strategy about AI in a certain way, and then guess what? Gen AI arrives, and it's not that the whole market has changed, but there's a net new element, which is a massive opportunity. So don't be obsessed by scale, but really build an organization that knows how to grow the trees. What can you measure that the tree is growing? Can you plant it and water it in the right way? Can you adapt this process so you can seize new other opportunities? Because your company is going to evolve. That's also early stage. So I think it's really in that domain, that perspective, that almost opportunistic view. Match all the opportunities you have with the ability to execute on them somehow quickly And that's what's going to make you grow, because that's really something that's compelling. If you get the confidence of your CEO, of the board, like, okay, these guys are pretty good at turning this into value, I want to invest in them. So that's what's going to bring the scale, not the application of a playbook or these kind of things. So it's really, how does your organization learn? How do your organization has kind of the right velocity to even decide what works or not? How does the organization evolve by doing things they've never done before? And how does the organization, coming back to the partner angle, can work with some of these partners? You have this in the DNA of your organization. I think you're going to see a growth curve. The forest is going to grow pretty rapidly.
Excellent advice, sort of a learning, developing, expansive, open DNA to your marketing department will set you up for whatever will come, because we couldn't predict a lot of the changes that we've seen over the last few years, and who knows what will come next.
Yeah, no, build to learn and learn to build. That's in a nutshell. That would be the advice.
So I want to come on to our next section, which we call Smart People, Dumb Questions. And this is a section where I have a bag of questions here, and I'm just going to pull them out of this bag. And these are personal questions. So the first one is, what book are you currently reading?
I'm currently reading an interesting novel, French novel, which had a prize in France about. It's a novel, but on actually it's about Russia and how some of the people very close to the current power in Russia have been extremely influential in European politics as well as internal politics in Russia. I'm always fascinated by politics. I think there's a good plenty of observations that we can reapply on a business side about humans and such. So it's called Le Mage du Kremlin in French. So I don't know if it's been translated, but that's the current book.
Wonderful. What's the oddest thing that you've ever eaten?
Oh wow. Well, it's going to be sounding very non-French, but the oddest thing is probably escargot or snails, which I did it once because my wife asked me, so I can attest I didn't like it, but it's probably the oddest thing.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I particularly remember one time eating them and it sort of crawled back into its shell, and it's at that point you think, shouldn't have eaten those.
Oh yeah, that is when it was not cooked enough.
What's the most dangerous thing that you've ever done?
I guess skiing in certain places or doing mountain biking back in the day, and in certain places could have without enough security at times that could have been, it must have been dangerous and that could have gone wrong.
And so we'll move on to our next section, which is called the FiredUp 5.
That's right. This is our quick fire round. We ask the questions. You give us a 1 or 2 sentence answer on each. Thomas, are you ready?
I am ready.
All right. The clock is ticking. Not really. What would you do if you weren't in marketing?
I'd be an architect.
What is the best career advice you were ever given?
Take an opportunistic view on things.
What is the tool you can't do your job without?
My iPhone, and especially the Spotify app. No advertising, but can't live without music.
What is the thing you have learned in the last year?
Remember the importance of a healthy culture and how it makes the impossible happen.
And what marketing tactic are most brands overlooking?
I think content, everybody does content in a certain way, but it's a huge part of the brand. In a world where the audience doesn't have a lot of time, a lot's going to be judged. The perception of your brand is going to be built on your content output.
I totally agree with that, particularly in a space such as you're in, where there's so much education that needs to be done, so rapidly evolving. It's really important to be, if you can become the resource, the place to go to educate people, you're instantly on you're building brand and you're building preference right there.
Exactly. That was a tough exercise, by the way. It's very hard for me to only be still sticking to 3 sentences. I love it, by the way, but that's an excellent exercise.
Thomas Bean, CMO of Domino Data Lab. Thanks for being on FiredUp today. If people want to reach you, how can they best get in touch?
They can find me on LinkedIn. I guess that would be the best way. I have a very short name, Thomas Bean, B-E-E-N. So happy to engage with you on LinkedIn.
And all your contact details will be in the show notes. Thomas, thanks for taking the time to chat with us today. It's been great to catch up, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that about wraps it up for today. But before we close, we did want to offer all of our FiredUp friends a chance to grab a mega pack of all of our ebooks and guides. That's our guide to content marketing. That's our startup guide to paid media using Google Ads. It's our guide to attribution. You can get all of those, over 100 pages of goodness, at firebrand.marketing/FiredUp freebies. That's freebies with an S. And we hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, please give us a rating wherever you get your podcasts, or drop us a note at firebrand.marketing. And as ever, the details of how to get in touch with our guest today can be found in the show notes. Thank you for listening. And until next week, get out there and crush your marketing goals.